Okay, well, welcome back. We're so glad you decided to come back and listen to another one of our podcasts, the Jiu Jitsu Mindset. My name is Pete Deely, and I'm here with my professor, Professor Lucas Rubbo. Professor, so good to see you.
Yeah, so good to see you, Peter. Welcome back, everyone. Always a pleasure to be here, Peter.
Hey, Professor, I know you messaged me the other night and I didn't get back to you. I'm sorry, I was a little slow on it. I just had a latte on my mind. So if
How's that going?
it's going good. For those of you who have been with us, you know that we have our submission coffee. And so if you like what you're hearing and you want to be sort of a part of the community, people have asked, well, how can you support us? And the way you can support us is picking up a bag of our submission coffee, and you can find it at a well-run life gear. So the professor and I usually, this is like coffee talk for us. We get together, do the podcast, have our cup of coffee.
Absolutely. It's a great coffee, like really, really good. Like we already talked before, it's from a farm in Brazil, and they have a store, a place in Chandler, Arizona. And the coffee is absolutely amazing. We're definitely going to be, when you buy a purchase, the submission coffee going to be helping us, the podcast, but it'll be a favor to you as well, drinking something with a really good quality.
Exactly. And,
And talking about that, I'm sorry to cut you off
not at
there,
all.
but as you guys know, submission coffee, your percentage rate on submissions it go increase dramatically, right?
That's true.
And Peter, talking about that, last week we had a tournament, and the man right here, the man right there, Pete Dilly got a gold medal with submissions on your match, right?
Well, it wasn't a fair fight because I mean that guy he didn't get a chance to have the coffee. So I should have a little asterisk that I drank the submission. Yes, I was it was a great day for me. Thank you for that. We had two submissions. Now the previous tournament I lost, but that was before I was drinking the submission coffee. So
Absolutely.
draw whatever conclusions you want, audience. But the
And
second
how
submission,
much younger was your opponent's Pete?
well, that was the other thing that wasn't really fair. I mean, these guys were 10 years younger than me. So I hate to beat up on the kids, but it's the way it goes sometimes.
That's
Yeah,
absolutely amazing. Congratulations again.
thank you very much. So yeah, I've had enough now tournament experience where I've experienced like good days, and I've had the days that it hasn't worked out the way I would have liked. And so I know enough to enjoy those ones when they go your way and not get too crazy about the ones when they don't. So thank you. Well, listen, and speaking of competition and you know uh, having good days and bad days, we were going to talk today about kids and jujitsu and kids and parents and jujitsu because when you're young, the role that your parent plays is super important. Um, and so uh, we've spent a lot of time talking about jujitsu being for everyone, and most of the folks listening are probably thinking of it in terms of like for the adult. But jujitsu, we know the best time to start jujitsu is when you're really young. The second best time is now. But if all things being equal, if you have a chance to start young, it can be something that's an advantage to you if you really want to get good at it. But I think if you're a parent and you're choosing between football and baseball and ballet and softball and all the different things, jiu-jitsu should be one of the things that you're thinking about. So, Professor, you've coached probably every age group,
Hmm.
and you've seen a lot of dynamics of kids training and kids training alongside parents. What are some of the benefits that are the most obvious in your mind for a kid training jujitsu? Why would a parent want to put their child in jujitsu?
Sure, Peter. As I would say, 65 to 70% of my coaching, right,
Hmm.
is for kids.
Okay.
That's just the way how things are now, and which is awesome.
Yeah.
I believe everyone that is hearing us, maybe some of you guys already into jiu-jitsu, some of you guys know and you want to find out a little bit more, right?
Right.
And I think the main thing to talk about, one of the things to talk about here is like why jiu-jitsu compared to other martial arts. Like, it is just jiu-jitsu that we're talking, or martial arts
Right.
in a whole, right? I think that's important. And every martial art will have their core values in a pretty similar way.
Right.
I believe the main difference is the way how those things are being taught. And with that being said, jiu-jitsu is a way that is not just saying I'm not reading a book on how to have confidence and how to overcome the fears. It's something that you want or not, you need to deal that on the regular basis, right? On every day, on every time that you go to train, you're gonna be dealing with some type of situations and some emotion.
Right.
But I would say this: if you're a parent and you want your kid to have the confidence and have the ability to defend themselves, or to be comfortable and confident enough, the ability to reach their full potential on whatever they decide to do, jiu-jitsu is one of the best things that can happen on their life.
Right.
Okay. And for everything that is being working on the regular daily basis. Again, it's not the way how we say, it's the way how it's being taught by your training partner right there.
Right.
Right. You feel the humble and you feel the victories, you feel the defeats, and you know that ability to deal with different type of emotions and try to understand how to deal with that is really important.
Yeah, so maybe that's interesting about like jiu-jitsu versus other martial arts. And when you think about the training process of training a child in jiu-jitsu versus karate or boxing, or
Yeah.
pick whichever martial art you might like to, could you maybe talk a little bit about the difference in those experiences? And honestly, as you're talking, I'm thinking about my own childhood. Like when
Mm-hmm.
I studied karate as a child, um, or Aikido as a teenager or whatever, the training was the contact between me and the other students was pretty minimal. Like we would spar,
Mm-hmm.
but the sparring was really light. And so when I think about jiu-jitsu, the two training partners are so close to each other, and there's more the nature of what does it feel like to actually be in the situation seems to
Correct.
be truer to like a self-defense situation than
Mm-hmm.
in some of the other martial arts that I trained as a kid. I'm sure that's not true for every
Mm-hmm.
karate school and every taekwondo, so on and so
Sure.
forth. But could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think again, striking martial arts are awesome. They have their place and their time. But again, we're trying to talk about something for everyone, right?
Right.
And the way how striking is, you want or not, the person who is bigger and stronger
Yes.
will have an advantage.
Right.
Okay. Maybe if the smaller person has like incredible skill sets, way more than the bigger person, yes, it's a fair fight. But still, on the moment that we get like a punch or a slap on the face,
Yeah.
things change,
Right.
right? Is inevitable. The bigger and the stronger person will have an advantage on that, which doesn't happen in jiu-jitsu. Not necessarily happen in jiu-jitsu, right? That's the way
Right.
how we train. Jiu-jitsu level things way more about the comparing the skill levels, right, to strength. I think it's a really nice quote that I heard once, like jiu-jitsu represents the human intelligence over the human strength.
Yeah. Right.
That's what you're trying to do. And learning jiu-jitsu, you learn how to neutralize those attacks.
Right.
And like you were saying, the main reason why a bully will over confident like the target is because of their being afraid of the physical contact,
Right.
right? Most part of the times is this. And the
Yes.
moment that you understand that the physical contact is not the worst thing in the world, and
Yes.
you know how to handle that, your confidence level goes up, which most part of the times you're not being a target anymore. But if it happened, you already know how to deal with this.
Yeah.
And that's only jiu-jitsu bring to you.
Yeah, so I follow what you're saying. I like that idea. So as a pure like a self-defense tool. So
Mm-hmm.
putting your child in with the notion of giving them confidence that as they move through the world, if someone tries to attack them, a bully or someone on the street or someone who that the skills that they have are the most realistic skills you could have to kind of get into a conflict and get away from it, right? I mean, I don't know that
Correct.
we teach the idea that the littler person necessarily wins against the bigger person, but can
Hmm.
come away and escape,
Yes.
and be less hurt. If there's a
Hmm.
giant weight and strength differential, it's still a dangerous interaction.
Yes.
But jujitsu gives you the best chance, I should say, to get away.
And also, Pete, I think jiu-jitsu, let's think about some natural skills, right? Or
Right,
natural reactions. If someone's push you, you might want to push back,
right,
right? If you are in a aggressive situation, if someone's get close, you might want to throw a punch or a kick. Even if you don't know how to do it, it can be in an uncoordinated, maybe in a wrong way.
right,
But you still, that's your natural reactions, your natural skills. On the moment that you get hugged,
right,
you want to try to get out of that.
right.
Okay. But how are you going to get out if you don't have the skills to do that?
Sure.
And in jiu-jitsu, you learn those skills.
Mm-hmm.
Not about getting out, but actually is one of the best things that can happen to you if you're a
Right. Yeah.
jiu-jitsu person and you get hugged. All right, now everything is right, is my world, because the
Right.
challenge part is to short the distance and control, right, the distance where before you get close. And talking about that, if you realize when you start to develop those skills that they are not natural to most people, is what's going to make a difference in a self-defense, in a confidence, and an ability to defend yourself.
Yes. So, okay, so jujitsu as it relates to kids as a tool for self-defense, as a skill to defend yourself, I think
Mm-hmm.
the argument we're making here is that if that's what you're interested in, jujitsu is probably your best choice as a practical way to have your child feel confident in the world that they could. Now, if you're looking at it as a sport and for other reasons why it's good for you, I would also, I mean, my opinion about the types of physical skills that you pick up um, it's almost like gymnastics. I mean, students of gymnastics, when they go to other sports, do those other sports better
Yes.
for their
Yes.
gymnastics training. And in fact, in many ways, I feel like gymnastics is a fundamental skill that everybody should have on some level to do other things. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like jujitsu physically does that for kids as well. Like it gives you an awareness of where your body is in a way that, like football or basketball, not it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't give you quite as much because you have to know where both your feet are, both your hands are, where your head is in relationship to your
Yes.
shoulders, how your torso is oriented. So I think it introduces you to your body
Mm-hmm.
in a very important way as an athlete. Because maybe your child wants to play. I hope they want to play more than one sport. I don't like this
Yeah.
trend that has developed that we specialize children as baseball players or basketball players. I feel like they should play lots
Mm-hmm.
of things. As athletes, do you notice the same thing? Like, do you notice that jujitsu as a way to train the body is favorable to kids compared to other
Yeah,
sports?
I agree 100%. And that's sometimes a discussion that we have with parents when but my kid already does maybe baseball or basketball or soccer or whatever other
Right,
sport it is. And I'll say that's awesome. It
right,
doesn't need to be one or the other. If you
right.
don't have a
Yes,
schedule conflict, one just gonna help the other. Like, look what you're doing jiu-jitsu. Like the amount of drills and trainings and techniques, and where the kid will learn how to balance themselves. And
right,
balance is important for whatever sport you decide to play.
right.
Coordination is important for whatever sport you decide to play. Confidence is
Yes,
important for whatever sport you decide to play.
right.
So it doesn't need to be one or the other. Like one sport will help the other, and you can see a difference, right, when a kid is exposed to different areas. And you pick up everything way easier, right? Because you just have that muscle memory from different areas. So I agree 100% on what you're saying.
Right. And I'll try not to go too far off on my soapbox about this, but I feel like kids that specialize in single sports suffer often the worst injuries as they get into their late teens because their movements have been so singular. Well, just the way, like when we began our podcast as an older person, when I think about like ways I want to move when I'm 90 and 95,
Hmm.
jiu-jitsu is great training for me to expand my range of motion and to keep what range of motion I have. I think for children, it gives them a certain way to become athletes that they can't get. I mean, maybe wrestling has an analogy to it, but I think it's special in that regard. So you touched on one thing that I'd like to go deeper into, because the feeling confident from a self-defense perspective and feeling confident as an athlete that you can do different things with your body. I mean, we talk a lot about like on the mats and off the mats. And so
Hmm.
um, I've heard you talk about with children, and even with the adults, I should say, when you're in a jujitsu session, whether you're specific training or a competition, the outcome of that shouldn't be seen as just, a win or a lose. There are other ways to. So can you talk about the mindset that jujitsu helps kids develop?
Yes, is that a win and learn mindset, right?
Right. Yeah.
Win or learn mindset. So jiu-jitsu, and I believe in all sports, but that's something that we talk a lot in jiu-jitsu. You might gonna have your win, which is awesome, congratulations, but and you definitely let me change, you definitely gonna have your losses.
Right.
And like we already talked before, every time that you lose, it brings you that self-reflection
Right.
where you can point the things that you're committing wrong, point the mistakes, and maybe change the path for the future competitions, or right for the future whatever goal that you have. And the winning, it's sometimes you just forget about it because, well, I won, you work it, maybe I commit that mistake there, but you know what, I was able to come back, and you don't think about what happened,
Yes.
right? And in jiu-jitsu is something that, because it's also like an individual sport when you were competing, right? As much you need a training partner and a team and everything else, but when you're competing, it's only you over there.
Right.
So it brings all that responsibility for whatever happens. You need to deal with the consequence of your acts
Right.
right away,
Yes. Yes.
right
Yes.
away. And this is something that sometimes in other areas, some people barely notice.
Right.
A mistake that I commit in a different area, maybe I won't pay for that mistake, someone else will pay. In jiu-jitsu, whatever you do, you're
Yeah.
gonna pay for that mistake.
Right.
It brings you that, right?
Yeah, the feedback loop is immediate, right?
Exactly.
There's an action and the reaction happen, and there's only one person out there, for that
Mm-hmm.
moment. And one of the things that's interesting to me something I've observed in your coaching of children that I really like is that you emphasize this notion of character, and that might
Mm-hmm.
not be true everywhere. So if you're a parent and you're looking to find a school, I think it's useful to listen to the words that are the professor is using to coach the kids. Is it the words of winning and learning, or is it winning and losing? Because that's a pretty different cultural
Mm-hmm.
assessment. And we had a moment, just a detail about our school that was, we have one of our professors, Professor Tom. Some kids were out and they threw rocks in the parking lot. Um, and whether they hit cars or not, it wasn't entirely clear, but the kids are doing something they shouldn't do. So when they come in, Tom, in a very fatherly manner, was like, I should not have to tell you guys to be throwing rocks in there. But what was interesting to me is that Tom's in that moment was uh, using somebody's behavior as a way to say, listen, how you behave is important, and we don't leave what goes on off the mats matters here. So if you're not going to follow the rules that you can park your car safely in our parking lot, then we don't want you training on the mat. And
Yeah.
that to me was an important little moment for these young people, because there was a consequence to that action out there. And nobody fessed
Mm-hmm.
up like I was the rock thrower, but everybody had to deal with the consequence of that bad behavior. Um, so let's say I'm curious from a mindset perspective in the win learn idea.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, have you observed perhaps somebody who was a very physically gifted child came into the studio but took time to learn. Wasn't a didn't take this quickly. They took a while to become good at, as all of us do. Um,
Mhm.
and did you feel like that helped the kid maybe be a little humbler, or prepare them to be a better athlete because they're more coachable? I've seen lots
Mhm.
of kids where you pick up a soccer ball and it seems like they were born with a soccer ball in their cradle, right? Um,
Uh-huh.
and they're sometimes hard to coach because they're so good without
They
being
do their
coached.
own thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Have you seen that in the kids?
Uh, I would say sometimes they have some kids that they start to develop uh, their own strengths, right?
Hmm.
Which that's exactly the goal.
Right.
So when we're teaching, you were teaching not the things that I believe like a good coach, a good professor, a good master, and whoever
Hmm.
is teaching, you need to teach not what you want to teach, but what your
Yes.
student needs to learn.
Right.
Right? That's a main difference. It's not about how much you know, but how much can you translate to that person to be able to learn that thing on that moment, on the right moment for them. Right? Doesn't matter like if I want to do like a super fancy and crazy technique just to impress everyone,
Right.
but the gap to get to that point is so big that no one will never understand. And if they do, everything goes wrong,
Right.
right? So be able to learn the right thing. So when you teach like that, you teach the foundations of jiu-jitsu, you teach everything, right? You teach a guy, you teach a passing guy, you teach a good mount, escaping from mount, takedowns, guy pulls, self-defense. You're kind of covering all the areas.
Right.
But and then it's funny to see sometimes, even without ever teaching a specific movement, you see a kid or adult doing doing
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
And then that comes from that, like maybe a little bit of gift, right? Like a good understanding of the foundation will
Right.
take you further on more advanced techniques, not necessarily because you're going to be able to see and assimilate more, but because you can understand what's going to happen with those foundations. So I have seen situations like that, not in a way that was hard to coach,
Right.
but some movements that was like, man, I don't remember that I ever teach you that, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
awesome that you're doing.
So have you seen the opposite happen then? Have you seen a kid come into, your classes where they don't feel very confident and they're thinking, hey, I'm not a good athlete, and so I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
they already have made the assumption that they're not going to be good at
Yes.
it. But then you work with them, and have you seen their confidence blossom?
Oh, that's is what happened the most.
Okay.
Those super gifts and talent and super coordinate and all this and that is rare to find, right?
Right.
It's rare to see. And it's so rewarding to have the opposite happening.
Yes.
Like a kid with zero strength,
Hmm.
zero coordination, super unconfidence, like low esteem and everything start to change their mindset for a
Yes.
small victory. It's a small victory. It changes everything.
Hmm.
They balance themselves better. They talk better. They behave better. They make more friends. They maybe start to compete. And it's funny because just last weekend we had that happen.
Yes.
We had one kid from the juniors class competing for the very first time, and before the registration, the parents asked me, "Look, we want to register our kid to the tournament. What do you think?" And they, talking like being 100% honest. I was like, I think competition always have a place for everyone.
Right.
Well, and then we talked a little bit about all the benefits, which me and you are a big fan about competition.
Yes.
But keep in mind that it might be a stressful day, and the outcome we can never control. He's been training well, but have all kind of levels and this and that. I was just trying to prepare the parent for not a positive. I mean, for not a victory,
Right.
right?
Right.
If
Yeah.
if that was the parent was hoping for, which wasn't the case.
Hmm.
But I just didn't want to not give courage for the kid to compete, right? So I
Right.
give my full support. We talk a little bit, but inside me, I was like, man, I hope it won't be a bad experience
Yes. Right. Right.
because you know it was never a kid that showed extra interest in the class or never a kid that was actually sparring really well with other kids on the same level, you
Right.
know. And the kid went there, lost the first fight, but lost in a really, really good way, if
Right.
that can
Sure.
if I can put those words together,
Sure.
because it was a tough match. It was by points.
Mm-hmm.
He was fighting back. That was for me. That was a big victory. Was
Right.
he's fighting back, and he wasn't afraid.
Yes.
So he surprised me a lot from that, and he on that moment I had a boost of
Yes.
energizing. I was like, man, I'm so happy for that. Second match, he won. He
Oh,
submit. So he was able
submission. Right on.
to, yes. So he was able to have his victory. The two tastes of a competition, like a loss and
Yeah.
a victory, a medal, which it shows
Yeah.
the good reward for him working hard. And next day, he was another kid.
Yeah.
Like his
Yeah.
confidence, the way how he walk
Right.
and talk now is crazy.
Did
It's
you
so
slip him a
nice.
little coffee? Is that what happened? You gave him a little.
I won't tell that. I won't deny, but I...
Well, one of the things that you've repeated to me and you've said on the podcast that I think is true is that jiu-jitsu will help balance a person out in the sense that if you are too aggressive, it can temper your aggression because,
uh,
there's always somebody in your training circle who will, you know, kind of adjust your attitude a little bit,
mm-hmm,
as Brett might say. And then, on the other side of it is that there are those who need to feel more confident and be more assertive out there. And
uh-huh,
jiu-jitsu gives them an opportunity to develop it. And it sounds to me like, this child had a chance to kind of realize that they were more capable than maybe they thought. And then,
yes.
they were able to dust themselves off a loss, come back and fight hard and win, experience both sides of that. That's kind of like a perfect competition day in a
It
lot of
is. It
ways.
is. Because at the same time, if you critique that, imagine like if after everything that I said, the kid go there and win the two matches by
Right.
submission, very first tournament. Maybe he won't be able to deal with that much success right away,
Yeah.
that small success, but for him like a big victory.
Yeah.
So it was really good to see both things happen at the same time. And the way how he deal with that, even that he lost on the first match, he wasn't upset. He was actually like happy, like, oh, that was actually like nicer than I thought, like
Yeah.
way cooler. I'm having a lot of fun here.
Yeah, that's
Really
yeah,
nice.
that's I mean, that is a perfect competition day then, because if you can enjoy the experience, that's really, for my mind, you're putting yourself in this. It's falsely stressful in the sense that, like, the day afterwards, whether you win or lose, your life is going to return
Yeah.
to, right. It doesn't have consequence in that stuff, but it feels so consequential, and being able to control yourself in the midst of that stress has so
Mm-hmm.
much benefit in school, in work, in your relationships, because you have a level of awareness. Now, if you're a parent and you're bringing your child into this, your natural many parents have a natural inclination to, like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I want my child to experience this, but sometimes they have anxieties like, well, I don't want it, like,
Yeah.
didn't want it to be a bad experience. They don't want their kid to have a bad experience either. Now, the disappointment of loss, you can't overly protect your child from, because otherwise they're not competing if there's not a chance to lose, right? So, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about, like, parents coaching from outside the mats. I'm sure you've seen that in your,
Mm-hmm.
career, where parents think that they should be the coaches, and maybe you could tell a story or two about what you've observed out there of parents
Yes.
taking on that role.
Sure. I think well, I'm not a parent, so what I'm talking here, like I can only imagine was the feeling on having someone, right, like a kid,
Right.
you're a kid there fighting, and all the feelings that you can have. But I'm gonna talk that in a coaching perspective,
Right.
okay? And I think when you have your kid competing, I mean your kid training, first of all, especially when they're kids, you need to make sure they're having fun, they're enjoying what they're doing. Like
Yes.
don't take your kid to train jiu-jitsu, but take your kid to enjoy jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
That's a big difference on how they're going to deal with everything else about it,
Hmm.
right? Like we already talked about that, but so many cases that you see great talent kids that were champions on an age like between 3 and 14 years old, and on 15 years old, they don't want to see jiu-jitsu, they
Yeah.
want to talk jiu-jitsu anymore, you
Right.
know. Let's make sure this is not happening, because we know like how many benefits can bring to your life. It's better to, jiu-jitsu be fun for that kid once a week than
Right.
be a nightmare 3 times a week,
Yes. Right. Right. Yeah. Well said.
So allowing your kid to have fun in jiu-jitsu is the most important thing.
Hmm.
And with that being said, the competition can happen or not, right? And sometimes, with the best of intentions, parents get a little bit more excited when the kids start to, especially when the kids start to do good, right?
Right.
Show that they're liking to train, show that they're like not just enjoying jiu-jitsu, but train jiu-jitsu and going hard, and start to go for competition classes, start to go for do actual competitions. And that can be easily like overwhelmed.
Right.
And I believe the main lesson as a for a parent when you are coaching from outside is you're not knowing, but you're putting your kid in a conflict spot,
Right.
because you have the coaching happening inside the mat from coach, from
Right.
professor,
Yes.
and then they might gonna be telling one thing, and a parent might gonna be telling a different thing
Sure.
outside.
Yeah.
So you're gonna put your kid in a really uncomfortable spot. Who they gonna listen?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
you're
Right.
gonna listen to parent or you're gonna listen coach.
Right.
And on that, you see happen a lot. The kid, they keep seeking like the improvement of the parent all the time. You
Sure.
do a movement, look it back. Do another movement, look it back.
Yeah.
So the kid's not actually doing what they want to do. They're not
Yeah.
doing what they're not enjoying anymore. They
Right.
just want the approval, which can that tells a lot about that relationship between that parent and the kid,
Right.
right? If the kid thinks do good is the only way to be loved or to be approved by
Sure.
the parent,
Right.
you probably should change some things the way how you're doing,
Right.
right? And again, I can only imagine how difficult this is, but being rational
Yeah.
on that matter, that's the best advice that I have. Trust on the school that you choose to have your kid training. Trust on a coach. Trust on the professor, because they will know better. Sometimes I can say by my experience, I like to coach, like kind of like guide through the fights and through the movements during the
Right.
training session. But I also like a lot to just watch
Right.
and let things go, right? Like not coaching much on that specific situation. You allow the kid to create their own
Yes.
things and to fight on their own battles by themselves,
Yes.
than not
Yes.
by someone telling.
Right.
Okay, so it's a different type of exercise. I'm not saying don't coach ever. Like if you're coaching, if you're a jiu-jitsu coach, don't coach. I'm not saying that. I
Right.
just say like try this exercise, because
Yes.
you're gonna see nice things happen, and then it's easier to identify the weaknesses on a jiu-jitsu
Right.
game,
Yes.
or even on their own behavior, and the strength as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, you said a lot of important things there. Let me tease apart a couple of things. So, like the greatest jiu-jitsu family in the history of jiu-jitsu, the Gracies, right? I mean, can you talk? I mean, what was their attitude with their kids? I mean, now you talk about pressure. You have,
Yeah.
the if anybody would assert pressure for a child to like, hey, we really need you to be interested in this is the family business, the family tradition. You're connected
Mhm.
to, I know you've talked with some of the Gracies of this generation, but
Mhm.
how did they approach their kids with it? Just as a point of reference, like, so if there was ever going to be pressure, you'd expect it in the Gracie family. How did they do it?
Yeah, that was a question that we always, every time that I have an opportunity to talk with a Gracie,
Hmm.
and I have some time to ask some questions, right? That's the first thing that I ask, like, how's that? How's the pressure, like, especially being a kid?
Yeah.
And the answer is always the same, like, it was never pressure.
Right.
It was always like, have fun. They are training jujitsu without knowing that they were training jujitsu,
Yes. Right.
like rolling around and hugging each other. I know, go on top here. Okay, stay there. Okay, let's play this game. Stay
Yeah.
on top. And they're, especially kids are just sponges, right? All of a sudden, boom, they're going for money and they're holding there.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's nice. Or they're on bottom and they keep using the legs to every time that the other kid come close, they push back. So what they're doing? They're doing frames.
Right.
They're doing distance management,
Right.
but they don't know that. They're just have their for them. They're just playing. So that was the thing that interested the most. Was like, it was never a pressure. It was always having fun until the moment that they start to
Yes.
show their own interest in on taking this in a more serious level and competing. And then, of course, you're gonna have a more pressure, like anyone else will, like everyone else will have, if
Right.
you start to choose the competition path.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like you know, even for a champion of the Gracie and all the champions in the Gracie family, that still is a portion of their life, not their whole life. You're not going to compete at the highest levels of any competitive athletic event your
Mm-hmm.
entire life. And so if, at 15, you're done with jujitsu, you've been robbed of the opportunity to have it with you as a companion throughout your life. And I think that the more competitive, the more success a competitor has, the more attractive it seems like to make it, we're going to focus, this is all we're going
Mm-hmm.
to do, and so on and so forth. As opposed to the Gracie's attitude of like, look, we're going to enjoy this,
Yeah.
and we're going to take one step at a time, and it's about play as much as it's about anything else, and then slowly develop that. And then I've seen pictures of Elio Gracie at 95 rolling with Hickson,
Yeah.
and so there was, throughout that man's entire life, jiu-jitsu was available to him as a way to connect with other people,
Mm-hmm.
to continue to learn about himself. So I think it's super important. I am a parent. I have a blended family. I have 5 kids under my purview as a parent, and
Almost like a Gracie.
yeah, yeah. And so uh, I can say that as a parent, giving what you said about giving the kids space to have their own experience, and that the
Mm-hmm.
experience is the kids and not the parents, is so critical. Because, and that means sometimes not even being present for practice, and
Yes,
for
yes.
because the child changes their behavior in the presence of the parent. And without the presence of the parent, as long as the environment's safe, you trust the professor, you trust the school, that
Mm-hmm.
the ethics and the behavior that you're leaving your kids there is one that you agree with, then giving the kid a chance to have their own experience is something worth considering. Now, game days, as a child, I always liked it if my parents showed up. So I understand that. But even then, like, well, when a Gracie was competing as a teenager and all that, where would the family sit? Like, were they right up again? I mean, because not only would that create pressure, but people would pay
Uh-huh.
attention to the
Yeah.
adults. How did they do it?
I will give an example that Kyron Gracie gave to me. He was like my father, Carlos Gracie Jr. He never coached me, you know what I mean? I think he did it once and didn't work out well. So he's like, no, I'm not doing anymore. But also because master being master in
Hmm.
all areas, not right, it's not just as a martial art.
Right.
Uh, he understood that, man, I'm doing this. I'm just putting so much pressure on my son,
Yeah.
right? And depending on the age, we're just not ready to deal with all the pressure.
Right.
So a lot of times he was present on the competitions, but he was on the last seat on the bench,
Right.
like
Yeah.
super far away. Kyle, do your thing. And he will have the other professors and cousins and friends and everyone else coaching right there and helping on the battlefield.
Yeah.
But he was always trying to keep that distance. If you want to talk about it, we talk about it. And I never heard about this from Rickson Gracie.
Right.
But when he had Kron Gracie competing in Jiu Jitsu and even MMA, Kron Gracie still fight UFC.
Uh-huh.
Rickson is never there.
Yeah.
Rickson like maybe is one or twice on his corner.
Hmm.
Okay, and in Jiu Jitsu, I know he was a couple of times on the ADCCs, but on the low on the lower belts that I say like brown, purple, blue belt, most of the times was his brother, I mean, Kron's Gracie uncle, Hoyer Gracie, that was
Right.
competing, that was coaching
Yeah.
Kron. And the same idea, try to take the responsibility away, do your thing, focus on you, not on me. It's important that the parent understand that, the days for on this topic, right? When you're talking about
Hmm.
competition, the day is about your kid competing. It's not about you coaching. And again, everything you mean, all your actions, you mean really well, right?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
the parents just love unconditionally the kid,
Yes. Right.
right? And
Right.
everything that you do is like because you love so much.
Sure.
But let's try to think, a little bit and give a little more freedom on that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, I mean, in team sports, it's become like a source of humor, like parents behaving badly on the soccer field or the baseball stadium, where they're yelling at the refs and making, a
Mm-hmm.
big stink. And of course, you're more passionate. If you're passionate about your professional team, you're certainly more passionate about your
Yeah.
child. And so those emotions. So I think as a parent, you got to really be thoughtful about, well, what are you going to be feeling and not put those feelings on the kid? Because you may really be hopeful for them, but you
Uh-huh.
can't put the pressure of like, I really want you to win, because the kid's not going to interpret that as, I want you to have a good experience. They're going to be like, well, if I don't win, something's wrong, and that. So
Yes.
it requires a self-awareness as a parent, like of how are you behaving and how is that behavior
Yes.
affecting the kid?
And Pete, just to add to this conversation,
Yeah.
I'll give it can happen sometimes. It happened once, and this we had a talk, and this never happened again. It's just a misunderstood,
Hmm.
when this happened for the first time. Again, it's always the best.
Right.
But when the parent is coaching from outside the mat,
Right.
and it's different when you talk about competitions or actual classes, right? And
Right.
then if we talk about classes, what it happens is transform the whole environment in a competition arena,
Okay.
which on that point is not what you want, right? So just try to pretend this. We have two kids sparring, whatever age they are. That's between 6 and 7 years old.
Right.
One parent starts to coach their kid,
Yeah.
and then the coach allow that to happen.
Right.
So what's going to happen? The other parent going to
Yeah.
start to
Yeah.
coach the
Right.
other
Yeah.
kid.
Right.
So when you realize you have two guys, two grown up men
Yeah.
yelling on the middle of your class, it's not only an
Yeah.
uncomfortable situation, an embarrassing situation, but this can even generate maybe a bad feeling between the kids
Right.
and the parents.
Yes.
So look, if you allow this to happen on your school, that you probably will have like a really heavy environment, really heavy energy on your classes,
Right.
you know. And so again, like trying to have a conversation with a parent and make sure this not happening. And most of the times, if not all the times, they understand. Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, yeah, that makes total sense, and everything's fine.
Yes.
But
Right.
if you allow this to
Yeah.
happen, it becomes like a circus.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I've seen that play out in a lot of team sport environments where, people are, they lose themselves in the moment a little bit and they're just
Uh-huh.
enthusiastic, but it does, then it shifts the focus, as you say, away from the experience of the children, and now it's about
Yes.
the parents, and very little good is going to come of that. It's only going to end because one kid, now we're in a win-lose situation, not a
Yeah.
win-learn. And then, the winner is going to feel good about it. The loser is not, oh, I learned something. They're going to be like, well, yeah, that's a mess. And I appreciate, your ability to kind of create an environment where people feel safe and good, and then, but still have structure and boundaries in which,
Sure.
hey guys, I'm the professor here, and this is,
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving instruction, and you guys, if you violate that, I can't just be worried about your kid. I got, 20 kids on the mat, or,
Mm-hmm.
you talk about an arena, something goes wrong with one, parent
Yeah.
and child, the whole environment,
Yeah.
as you said, gets spoiled. Well, as we kind of come into, the end of our hour here, I mean, at the beginning, we talked about, how good jujitsu can be from a confidence perspective, right? You want your kid
Mm-hmm.
not to go through the world worried about physical confrontations and feeling like, hey, if I'm in a confrontation that it's the end of the world. We feel like jiu-jitsu is a realistic way to prepare them for something unpleasant like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we also talked about like athleticism, that as a choice for developing athletes, that it really,
Mm-hmm.
has a place for any other sport that they might like. We spend a lot of time in this podcast talking about the mindset that comes of it. So we want, every experience to be a good one, which means that you might enjoy a victory of the moment, but nearly all of us spend more of our times where we're learning. And so we have to take those times where we're not victorious and enjoy them in their own sense, because they're a chance for us to get better. And then for you parents out there, just in terms of the way you're acting out there with your student, your child, there's ways to do it in which you can enhance your child's experience, and there are ways you can do it where you can take away from it. And if you're not thoughtful about it, you might be taking away from the kid's experience, not even, inadvertently. And by the way, you're probably hurting the experience of the children around them. So it's important that you're aware of yourself. So that, I feel like, were a lot of the most important things today, Professor. Anything else
I
that you'd
agree.
want to sort of like recap?
No, I agree 100%, Peter. I would say I'll just add this for why your kid, right, should be trained jiu-jitsu and why it's so important and why is jiu-jitsu. Bullying is a problem all around the world.
Yeah. Yes.
Is this always happen? Okay, and you have how schools sometimes deal with that, having that zero tolerance for bullying, right? But
Right.
in reality, most part of the times those zero tolerance politics about policies, sorry, is about almost like showing for the kid that reacts against the bully is wrong. Like
Yeah.
defend yourself, stood up for yourself is wrong
Right.
because you're gonna be in trouble if that happens,
Yeah.
right? And you can say a lot of times for a kid, stood up for yourself is okay to defend yourself is okay and right to defend those that cannot defend themselves. But the words they only go so much
Right.
forward, right? And the actions is what gonna stick with us. And in jiu-jitsu classes, that's what they will have. They will not just be reinforced by the words, but by the actions of the classes, of the exercise that, yes, they can stood up for themselves. They will have the confidence to do that. And most important, they will have the confidence and the ability to reach their full potential on anything else they decide to do because they'll have the confidence to do that, not being afraid about physical confrontation
Yes.
anymore,
Right.
and be able to deal with all the struggles and challenges and that happen in front of them. So if that, just find a great school around you.
Yeah.
We always say that, do your search and the benefits will be always there. And if your kid doesn't like much yet, make it fun or just
Yeah.
give some space,
Yes.
right? It's important that be fun. Need to be fun for the kids and they will learn playing games and
Right.
have fun.
Yeah. And on the bullying note, just as one idea is that the experience of being bullied is not just in the moment where someone tries to threaten you physically, it's in the fear of the
Yeah.
bully. So it's a psychological state of like something could happen. And so when you give the kid the confidence that, well, if something does happen, I have the confidence to do, you remove all of the fear, or hopefully a lot of the fear that comes along with it. So, as you talk about that, and it's never not been a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I moved around a lot as a kid. I had a heavy New York accent. When I moved out west, I was teased a lot, bullied a lot. You know, it's never not been, every generation before us, and sadly, there will be kids that are not don't behave correctly. So
Yeah.
um, I I agree with you. It's an inoculation. It's a way to protect your child.
Yes,
You know,
correct.
not just about the fight, but the fear. To like you
Mm-hmm.
can walk through the world. And that, by the way, once you get out of school, it's not like that can't happen to you as an adult, as we all know. All right. Well, thank you, Professor. It was a great conversation, and for those of you listening, if you haven't heard the previous podcast, we talk a lot about jiu-jitsu for everybody, and we encourage you to go back and listen. And if you've been with us from the beginning, thank you for listening, and stay tuned, because we're going to continue our conversation in the future as well. All right.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you all. See you next time.
Awesome.